I am Rebecca Wood Barrett. Thank you so much for having me. And I would first like to acknowledge that I am very grateful to live, work, and learn on the unceded shared territory of the Squamish and Lil'wat nations. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to all of you for coming from the Sea to Sky District. Our program, The Authors in the Schools, it's organized by the Whistler Writers Festival, and it includes Squamish, Whistler, Pemberton, Mount Currie, and Darcy to the north. And we receive generous funding from the Whistler Blackcomb Foundation, Whistler Community Foundation, the Province of British Columbia, Libby McKeever, Rotary Whistler Millennium, Whistler Public Library, and the Whistler Writing Society. So thank you, because they helped pay for the books that are in your classrooms and for this presentation. So today, getting right to business, I'm going to tell you about my middle grade chapter book, My Best Friend is Extinct, which was published in March this year. And it has 30 illustrations by the very talented Cornelia Lee. And there's the front cover, so you can see that. I'm going to do a couple of short readings. I'll tell you about my writing process and a little bit about the writing life, and then we'll have some time for questions, about 15 minutes at the end. So if you have any questions, be sure to save them up, and we can either do, you can either put your hand up, or maybe the chat, your teacher can write them in the chat. That might be easiest. Okay, and I can see you in your classroom, so that is awesome. So first up, hands up, who likes going outside in the rain? There's a couple. Oh yeah, it's a couple enthusiastic rain. Okay, all right. So good for you, because I'm not a huge fan of going out in the rain. Okay, here's another question. Who likes going outside in the snow? Yes, yes. Wow. Yes, way more enthusiasm there. That's awesome. Yes, me, I love it. And it has started to snow here in Whistler, and I'm sure in the other parts of the corridor we'll have snow this winter too. Okay, who likes building snowmen? Hands up. Anybody? Right. What about making snow forts? Do you get to do that? Yes, me too. Who likes throwing snowballs? Are you allowed to throw snowballs? Maybe not so much at school, hey? Yeah, so in the book, they're not really allowed to throw snowballs either, but they do throw a few snowballs. So there's a ton of snow in the book. And so if you like snow, then you will enjoy, hopefully, reading the book. So My Best Friend is Extinct is a story about 10-year-old Henry Springs, who is overjoyed when the wintry mountain town that he and his mom have recently moved to experiences a record-breaking snowfall. So even the locals think it's a little bit weird that there's this much snow. And so there's kind of rumors going around that the extreme weather could even mark the start of an ice age. So there's a little bit talk of climate change. Is this causing it? Nobody's quite sure. But what they do know is there is a ton of snow, and it snows every single day. Now, Henry loves snow, but he does have a little bit of a hard time making friends. He is new to town. And something that you need to know about Henry is that he has a ton of energy. And sometimes that gets him into a little bit of trouble with his friends and in the classroom. So in the book, he starts to make two new friends, Coco and Lucas. And he also makes a couple of, let's call them frenemies. So that's Jackson and Maddie. So they're kind of friends. They seem nice when they're in class, but as soon as they get on the playground, they seem more like enemies because they're not that nice to him. And they, sort of do some unpleasant things to Henry on the playground. So why don't I start off with a short reading from the book? Now, This is right at the start. So Henry, they are all on the playground and it is lunchtime. So they've got a bit of time to themselves. There's also a lot of snow. All right. Hundreds of icy missiles buzzed overhead. I was stuck in the middle. Pow, pow, pow. The snowballs pelted my back and legs, stinging like crazy. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, thwack! One smacked me right in the ear. Headshot! 1,000 points! Shouted Jackson in his scratchy voice. I dropped to my knees and hunched over. A cold slug of ice slid down my neck. Snowballs thumped all around me in the thin layer of snow. With soggy grenades flying in all directions, I didn't dare look up. The school's intercom crackled, and Principal Kirkland's voice boomed across the field. Students are reminded that throwing snowballs is strictly forbidden. Enjoy the snow. For a heartbeat, the snowballs stopped. I had a quick look around. Over by the forest, Jackson and Maddie froze mid-scoop. Their friends paused too. On the opposite side of the schoolyard near the fence was another pack of kids holding their snowballs in the air. I could see Coco and Lucas rolling a huge snowball up to them. What were they doing? Making a snowman? Didn't they realize we were in the middle of a full-scale battle? We're not throwing snowballs, yelled Jackson at the school. He was always hoarse, like he'd been cheering at a championship hockey game the night before. We're throwing ice balls. I ducked my head at the battery of snowballs as they winged into the sky. Whack, whack, whack. 3 of them nailed me right in the back. I had to get out of here. I started to crawl on hands and knees towards Lucas and Coco. They were the only ones definitely not attacking me. Bam! It seemed my backside was an especially popular target. Then I caught one across the top of my head. My toque went flying. That was it. I was done. I spread out on the ground, closed my eyes, and covered my head with my arms as best as I could. Suddenly, someone grabbed my hands. I kept my eyes closed, too terrified to even open them or fight back. They started dragging me across the snow. I felt my pants sliding down, the snow scraping my bare belly like hot burning coals. I was sure that any second now they'd slide all the way down, and then I would die of fatal embarrassment. They stopped, rolled me over. A purple toque with 2 big brown eyes peered down. Henry, are you okay? It was Coco. I blinked. Lucas leaned over me too, grinning. Man, you got pasted out there. And here's a little picture of Henry getting pasted by snowballs. With his pointy nose, huge front teeth, and giant smile, he kind of reminded me of a cheerful beaver. And here they are, pulling Henry out of the way, dragging him. He handed me my toque and I stuffed it back over my head and ears. Keep your head down, he warned. I sat up and realized the mini ice bombs weren't hammering us anymore. That was because we were hidden behind the big snowball. Coco and Lucas weren't making a snowman. They were building a snow fort. What I didn't know yet was that eventually it would become a gigantic snow fort, and that someday it would protect us from things much worse than ice balls. All right. Thank you for being great listeners. That was the first couple of pages of the book. And one of the things that happens to Henry is that there are a few other students who are quite hard on him. And so one day when he's digging a snow tunnel, Jackson and Maddie jump on top of the tunnel and Henry gets squashed and he gets a concussion. And so my question for you is, does anybody know what a concussion is? And maybe your teacher could write in the chat box your answer. Does anybody, what is a concussion? Can you tell me? I've had a concussion. Does anybody know? Or if you're having trouble with the chat box, you can always just unmute yourself and wave your hand and just come on. Oh, here's some answers. Great. When your brain move, when you bump your head, good answer. Yes, when your head gets hurt and you get knocked out. Yes, you might be knocked out. Head injury, you hit your head hard. A concussion is when you hit your head and you bruise your brain against your skull. Yes, that is a very good answer. Oh, you may not remember what happened.
A concussion is when you can hurt your head so badly that you can't remember things that happened before.
Yes, that can happen too. Okay, great. You guys have all the correct answers. Yes. Okay, now what I'll get you to do is put your hands up in the classroom. Have any of you had a concussion? Put your head up if you bumped your head really hard. You may not have been diagnosed. Yeah, I see a few people. I see a few friends out there putting their hands up. Yeah, when you're really active, as I know lots of you are in the sea to sky, because we like going outside and having fun and doing sports, don't we? Although sometimes you can just hit your head on a shelf or something, which is no fun either. So yes, okay, I see a few of you had a concussion. I've had a concussion too. I've had a couple. They're not fun. Your head does hurt, you get some headaches, and you don't feel that well. Sometimes you feel a bit nauseous. I got a concussion from falling off a horse. And the other one, which is kind of funny when I think about it, I hit my head on the roof of a golf cart when we were going over a speed bump. So that's kind of one of the silly ways you can get a concussion. I don't recommend it. All right, so Henry misses a few days of school because of his concussion, because he needs to stay in a dark room and really just chill out for a few days. He doesn't get to go on any screens, and he's not supposed to read. So he just has to, have a very calm time in a dark room. And that's really quite hard for him because he has a lot of energy. So one of the things that happens is that because he's not allowed to do very much, his mom hangs out with him and she tells him some stories. He says, "Can you tell me some stories?" She says, "Okay." So, and one of the cool things that she does is she has a job as a snowplow driver. So she starts to tell him a story that she has seen some weird things at night when she's driving and making the snowbanks and pushing all the snow out of the way. She has seen maybe something out of the corner of her eye, just like my cat going by. She's not sure what it was. And so she's kind of telling Henry a story, and he takes it as being the truth. And he never really does know if she was just telling a story or the truth. And so he's kind of convinced that maybe there is something out there, like a weird creature. And so he decides to go exploring on top of the huge snowbanks. And what happens is he falls inside the snowbank and discovers that there is a tunnel big enough for him to walk inside. And this tunnel goes all the way down the street. And it's a little dark, but Henry is a very prepared adventurer, and he has his backpack, and he's got a little pencil light, a flashlight, and he's got lots of snacks. And I think he even has a rope in there. And he sees something strange in this tunnel. And something you need to know about Henry is that He is quite a brave, adventurous soul. So fear is not his first thought. And he decides to chase after this strange creature. And I'll read to you for a short little bit about Henry. If I can find the right page. Oh, here we go. Chasing after this creature in the tunnel. I followed at full tilt. My breath punched in and out until my lungs felt like they would pop. I was just about to give up when the creature stopped and flopped over. What? Something was clearly wrong with it. Maybe it was sick or injured. I had to help. Carefully, I inched toward it. I could see its belly heaving up and down. The animal lifted its head and blinked at me. I froze. I had never seen anything like it. Pale blue eyes, the same color as the walls of snow, shone in the light. Covered in thick white fur, the creature had faint gray stripes above its eyes and two triangular ears poking out from the top of its head. It reminded me of a mashup of a polar bear and something out of Dr. Seuss, with its huge, oversized paws, long, skinny legs, and a short snout like a lion's. Something about those eyes made me unfreeze. I was still a little scared, but I had this urge to stick my hands in the creature's fur and give it a pat. When I got close enough to touch it, I took off my gloves. I reached out to stroke it. Underneath its fur, I could feel a bone poking out. A low growl rumbled in its throat. "I won't hurt you," I said. Suddenly it snapped at me, its teeth scraping over the back of my hand. I yelped and flew backward, landing on my backpack. I rolled over and sat up. The creature lowered its head and shut its eyes. Was it dying? Or maybe it was starving. "Poor guy," I said in a soft voice. "Are you hungry?" A threatening growl was the answer. The back of my hand throbbed. Underneath the glare of the flashlight, I could see two long red scrapes. But I still felt like I needed to help. I opened my backpack and took out my thermos. I unscrewed the lid and filled it to the brim with water. Then I pushed the lid toward the mouth of the creature until my arm was within snapping distance. Would it chomp my hand again? I nudged the lid closer. The white head didn't move. I poked the lid again and again until it was inches from the tip of the animal's black nose. I waited. Nothing happened. "Here's a little bit of water for you." A weak growl. A sniff. White whiskers quivered. A pink tongue slipped out sideways and dipped into the lid, scooping in the water and then sliding back into the creature's mouth. The tongue moved like it had a mind of its own, separate from the animal, which didn't budge or open its eyes. After a minute, the tongue had slurped up all the liquid it could reach, and it disappeared back into the mouth. "More water?" I asked. The creature gave a huge yawn and said, "Yarp!" I was stunned. Yarp? Was that a yawn or the word yes? I reached out hesitantly for the lid and stopped midway. Was this a trick? Would the creature snatch my hand and try to eat me? I could tell it was definitely thirsty. Hungry, too, by the looks of it. I leaned in closer. That was when I noticed the bloody, matted wound on its front leg between its paw and knee. I grabbed the lid, filled it, and thrust it near the animal's snout. The nose twitched. "Here you go, more water." The animal lapped it up, this time with more enthusiasm. Maybe the first drink had brought it back to life. When the water was all gone, I asked, "More water?" "Yarp." "Yarp," I said, filling the lid again. This time, I didn't bother to pull my hand away. And that is the first time that Henry meets the creature named Yarp and takes care of him. And so what he decides to do is to haul the creature back to his house on a makeshift sled. Now he makes the sled, he takes off his jacket, lays it out, and then picks up Yarp, who is the size of, I'm going to say, a pretty good sized husky dog. So it's definitely a bit of a heavy effort to get him onto the coat. And then he drags him up the tunnel, out through another hole, onto the street, up the street, round the corner to his house. And there he builds a secret cave for Yarp and slowly nurses him back to health. They form a really special friendship, become good friends. Yarp is a great listener, and with all the troubles that Henry is having in school and with some of his friends, he really appreciates Yarp listening to him and his problems. And also, I think they actually kind of understand each other, even though Yarp never really says any other words except for Yarp. So you remember how I told you how Henry's enthusiasm gets him into trouble sometimes? Well, it gets him and his new friends Coco and Lucas into trouble at school when they try and go on an adventure off the school grounds when they're not supposed to. Henry really wants to show them something, and so they go along, and then the supervisor finds them and they get into trouble. And so when Henry tries to get out of trouble, he ends up telling some fibs. Does anybody know what a fib is? You could put your hand up. Oh, I see some hands there. Okay, maybe someone could tell me in the chat, or you can unmute. What is a fib for those of us who might not know? It's a lie. Yes, it's a lie. It's kind of a gentler way of saying a lie, a fib. And why would it be a problem if you tell your friend a lie? What could happen? Does anybody have an answer for that? It's a little bit of a tricky one. What could happen if you tell one of your friends a lie? What might be the downside? Oh yes, in Ms. Duffy's class, they say because they might not trust you again. And in Ms. Gilchrist's class, they say you could lose your friend. This is true. No more friendship. In Ms. Raylene's class, yes. Ms. Penny's, they might lose trust from you, yes. They might get mad and not want to be your friend anymore. They might not believe you or find out and stop being your friend. Yeah, that has to go along with trust, doesn't it? When you don't trust someone, you might not believe them. And that's exactly what happens to Henry. His friends that he does have, they don't believe him later on when he starts to tell them other information. It could hurt your feelings. Yeah, it's sad. Yeah, all those things are hard. So part of the story is that Henry is learning how to be a good friend, and he doesn't really get it right all the time, but he does learn about it through the story. And so the story is also about finding friendship in unexpected places. And so here's another question for everybody. You can put your hand up. Have you ever made a friend in someone or in some place that you didn't expect? Hands up if you have. Maybe you were on a summer holiday or a camp or on the ferry or traveling or even in your own classroom. Or maybe it's an animal too. Yeah. Yeah, so our friends don't always, they're not always where we expect, and that's what happens to Henry. All right. So now I would like to talk a little bit about where the story comes from. And after that, I'll take some questions. There is a question here. Will your book become a movie? Oh, that would be cool, wouldn't it? I think it would make a great animated movie. So my next task is to try and write the screenplay. Just a little background. I do have a background in screenwriting. So that's a skill that I could translate the book into a screenplay, which is what filmmakers use before they go and make the movie. All right. So let me see if I can get my PowerPoint going here. This is always the exciting moment of truth with technology. Thank you for your patience. There we go. Let me know if it doesn't come out. All right. So as I said, Cornelia Lee is the incredible illustrator. She lives in Toronto. And I did send her some pictures of a school that is in Whistler to give her an idea of sort of my area and what things look like. So if that school on the cover looks a little familiar, it is in Whistler. It's an, kind of made up illustration of it. All right, let me just see if I can go forward in this. Hang on. There we go. Okay, so where did my idea come from? I live right across from this area here in the image. And what happens is when we do get a lot of snow in the winter, the snowplows go by and they build up these really high snowbanks. And you can see here, the snowbank goes all the way up to the sign. And so I was just staring out at the snowbanks every day thinking, wow, that's a lot of snow. And then the snowbanks are kind of lumpy. And I thought, gee, there's enough room in there for an animal to live. And wouldn't it be cool if they came out at night? And I sort of thought of these, magical creatures that would come out at night and they would roam around and nobody would know about them. And then they'd go back in and they would sleep during the daytime. And I thought that would make a cool picture book. And so that was sort of my first idea. And there's some more snowbanks. So on the one side there's the trail, which this is a fresh snowfall. So you can see the snowbank is probably about almost 6 feet tall. And the person in the snowbank right there, that's my son a few years ago. His name is Oliver. And I wondered, could there be creatures hiding in those snowbanks? And what if they made tunnels inside the snowbanks? And that would be kind of like these perfect secret hidden highways for them to travel up and down the streets so that no one would really know about them until, Henry comes along and he falls into one of them. Okay, so I thought, well, what has to exist for this world to really make sense? And I thought, well, it has to snow a lot. And I think it has to snow a lot more than normal because this is the first time that the creatures have kind of entered this world. And so then I thought, well, maybe they live in the backcountry or something and no one's really ever seen them. So they just come out and they use these tunnels. So I thought, well, it has to snow a lot and it has to snow all the time. So I made that happen in the story. And the snow piles up everywhere. And these are some pictures from Whistler, the fire hydrant. I love the hat, and that's right outside my place. And then the other one that looks like kind of an elf's hat, that is way up the Callahan Valley. So some of you might have been you can cross-country ski up there, and they've got the ski jump and biathlon. So that is up that valley where they do get a lot of snow there too. So I just love, you may have noticed I love snow. All right. And then I had the idea of, okay, how does, Henry sort of discover all this? And he does love exploring. And I hope the book inspires you to go out and explore as well in your own backyard and get outside, whether it's snowing or not. I know in Squamish you have pretty exciting backyard with all those trees and beautiful rivers. So he goes, and that's when he discovers the tunnel. He actually slides over a cliff and kind of plummets straight through the top of the snowbank. So that's how he ends up in the tunnel. And that's where he finds the strange creature, and he calls it Yarp. And in that picture, he's dragging Yarp back to his house on his coat, which he's taken off. So what kind of creature? So when I first imagined the story, I really thought of it as a made up creature, something, just weird animals living in the snowbanks. But then I was doing a bit of research and I discovered that there is an actual extinct animal called the short-faced bear, Arctodus simus, and it lived in North America until about 11,000 years ago when the last ice age was happening, and then it receded. And so there are other creatures too, like saber-toothed cats. There are mega sloths. So there's a whole bunch of really quite large creatures that existed a mere 10,000 years ago in North America, which is amazing. I thought that's amazing because you think of dinosaurs, that's 65 million years ago. That's a long time ago. It's pretty hard to relate to millions and millions of years ago. But 10,000 years ago, I thought, wow, that's recent history. And so I came up with the idea, what if they never went extinct? What if they really were just hidden in the pockets of wilderness right in our own backyard? And then they came out because we had so much snow and these snowbanks had kind of made it possible. A little bit of creative license. I made Yarp and the other Yarpies white. So more like polar bears in their color than brown. In the artist's drawing. And then, does anybody know what a tree well is? Put your hands up if you've ever heard of a tree well. Okay, some of you have, great. Yeah, especially those of you who probably ski, maybe you ski or snowboard, you've heard of tree wells. So what happens is when you have a tree well, the fir trees, their branches all go like this. They're very good at not breaking when it snows. That's why their branches are really sturdy and they're shaped like that. And when you get lots of snow, and you can see in the drawing there, the snow just kind of falls down right off the sides, but it leaves a big hole in the middle. And you can see in the picture there, that's my son Oliver, and he's actually inside the tree well of that tree. And so what Henry does is he jumps into the tree well, and then because the snow is built up on the side, he digs a tunnel in there, and that's where he makes the snow cave. And that's where he drags Yarp in there, and that's where he nurses him back to health. So Yarp has got the injured paw, and he takes care of him, sings to him when he's helping him out because Yarp wants to bite him. And later Henry discovers that Yarp actually has a family clan as well, and he calls them Yarpies. What do the Yarpies eat? Well, I thought they have to eat something in the winter, so they survive on lichen. And does anybody know any facts about lichen? Let me just see if I can look at my chat. This might be tricky. I might have to save this one for later. Okay, so I'll ask you when we're done this. But so they end up chewing on the lichen to survive. And this is a map of Henry's world. So it was really important to me that everything in the book made logical sense in terms of the snowbanks and where they were related, and the snow caves and the snow forts that the students build in the school field. And so I spent probably a day or two mapping everything out and then going back to the book and making sure that it all meshed correctly. And that if any readers were like, I'm going to figure out this whole map, that it would actually truthfully and logically work. So I created a map. And then Cornelia Lee, the artist, she drew a more simplified map that is exactly basically the same. So it's kind of fun to flip back and forth and figure out at any point in the book, sort of where they are, what's happening. And so that's really helpful as you're reading. I started the book in 2016. I wrote 4 or 5 drafts, and Then it got published in 2021. So it's not a super quick process. I write when I have time. I try to write for an hour a day, but I get very busy sometimes. So sometimes I take a break for a few months, but I always try and come back to it. I also belong to a writers group of 7 people, and we meet every month to critique and edit each other's writing. So books don't just come out perfect in one draft, and there's, just like you do in your schoolwork, there's lots of editing and, kind of learning how to do things and improving, because you don't always know where you're going when you start. Here's some early sketches of the illustrations. So you can see Cornelia drew images of the characters, which I loved. I had no changes. And then she drew some pictures of Yarp and the Yarpies, and I thought that maybe they looked a little bit too much like a panda bear. So, and also I wanted them to have a lot longer legs. They're more like a horse with their super long legs and, a bit more of a squish nose. They don't have like a long snout like a regular black bear would. And then there's the saber-toothed cat as well, which to me looked awesome. And then the title, for a long time, I called it just Snow Book because I didn't have a good title. And then I called it The Ice Age is Coming, which was okay, but we never really know if there's an ice age in the book, so it didn't totally make sense. And then one of the people in my writers group, Libby McKeever, who is a librarian in her former job, suggested My Best Friend is Extinct. And I thought that was perfect because it makes you scratch your head. Like, how can your best friend be extinct? That's so weird. So now I'd like to open it up to questions. If you have questions about the book, about characters, about the setting, if you have questions about my writing process,